Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be. Welcome back to Streaming Media Connect 2025, our 15th Streaming Media Connect. I'm Steve Nathans Kelly, editor of Streaming Media Magazine and chair of Streaming Media Connect. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to Fast Forward, how fast platform and infrastructure providers can better serve the market. And as one of our panelists reminded me during rehearsal, ironic title giving that fast forward is not a feature that exists in fast. But before we get started, just a few housekeeping notes. The first person to identify the fast appropriate music we heard coming in, artist and track, will win a $50 gift card from Amazon. But we will announce that at the end of the session, and you must be present to win. Um, So chat in the chat as always, and then our moderator Brian Ring will be taking questions throughout from the Q&A. So put those questions in the Q&A, and sessions from all 3 days of Stream Media Connect are already appearing on the Stream Media YouTube channel. Bill's going to put that link in the chat. And join us back here May 20th to 22nd for the next Streaming Media Connect. The call for speakers is open, so go to the link that you see in the chat, even if it says February. I will get your session proposal, or if you just say you want to be a panelist, this is what I'm qualified to speak on. I'll see all that, and we'll be planning the content for that in the next couple of weeks. So please get those suggestions in. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the stage the inimitable Brian Ring of Ring Digital and hashtag Future of TV. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you so much, Steve. I really appreciate it. It's great to be here again today. Yeah, I have also put into the chat there, I do a free quarterly research report. I do a proprietary TV survey. I also do a Zoomcast. I've got Colin Dixon and David Bloom as regulars. All you need to do is go to futureoftv.live or click the link in the chat and you'll get an ungated version of that. I am so happy today to have four amazing panelists. Let's bring them on and I'll do a quick intro. First is Todd Hay. He's VP of Revenue and Engagement at Plex. Plex, a very unique and special and important player in our industry, hosting many, many channels and doing a lot of innovative things in the sort of app ecosystem portion of our market. Abhishek Neralla is Senior Director of Media and Content Services at A&E Network, also a veteran, also working for a major company in this space with lots of experience. Aaliyah Daniels is COO and a co-founder of Revry. They've been around since 2017, and she's got all kinds of amazing insights and experience of operating in this turbulent and dynamic Wild West environment. And finally, Laura Florence, I'm so privileged to have her on the panel. One of the sharpest gals that I know in the business, and I always love hearing her insights and what she has to talk about. So I'm super excited for today's panel. If you're in the audience and you have questions about how we can make fast better, right? What's the low-hanging fruit? I don't want this to be entirely about a great session, although I'm sure there's plenty of that we'll go through. I want to kick it off first with Fremantle, with you, Laura Florence. You have an incredibly unique brand, lots of amazing IP, and something we were just touching on right before is the importance of integrating social into your channels and your experiences. And you had a couple of examples, and I'll let you take both of them or either one, but one was Monster Garage, where you're helping to guide talent, et cetera, to get promotion of the channel, et cetera. And then the other was, and you can go into it after that, is Rig TV, this new show, a new channel that you've got where you're orchestrating a couple of big pieces of IP. I know that's a lot for one question, but why don't you take that first, starting on the social media element and how you're using these together to launch new channels and programs?
Absolutely. Thank you for that very nice introduction, Brian. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm Laura Florence. I run global channels for Fremantle. That essentially is our direct-to-consumer offering. Fremantle, if you didn't know, we have a consortium of a ton of different production teams, all situated all over the world. And so our team works with them and then several other internal departments to essentially coordinate what the opportunity is for fast channels and our broadcast channels. So the examples we were talking about are, we were able to work with our partner company, Original Productions, who does The Deadliest Catch and Ice Road Truckers. And those and that team had an entire library that was not activated. So shows like Monster Garage that had been off air for 10 years, we restored it into HD, and then we worked with Original Productions to relaunch that show on, and plus others on Rig TV, which is a network we created for them. Part of this opportunity is because Fremantle owns all of our IP, we are able to go back on social media and actually do coordinated outreach along as just one of the several tactics we do to drive awareness and discovery. I try and take a 360-degree approach, just like I did at the platform, at our platform, to bring all the teams together to understand what we're driving to, and then educating all of our touch points that will help to promote the shows. It was also a great opportunity as we were working with Jay Leno on a YouTube show that was a on-air series for several years in NBC. And we were able to bring that show as a fast first original production also onto Rig TV. So this is kind of the neatest. Oh, go ahead.
No, just gonna say, just to get a little more tactical on the idea of like, where do you direct? You tell you're engaging with social and bringing. How do you drive tune in? Is it one of these things where it's like, yeah, it's any of these 8 platforms, or are you trying to direct tune in one way or another? Given that today you don't have an app.
Yeah, so for us, it's all strategic, right? So there's the first, which is just general awareness, and our goal is to have our core channels on every platform because it's really hard right now to drive consumers to watch just one particular way. They watch how they watch, and that could be on YouTube, that could be on social, that could be on, a specific platform. So our first goal is just to make awareness that it is all available. We will do more technical approaches to, let's say, if it's Plex or if it's Pluto, tactics that drive to that particular customer. And so we actually have a lead that will work with the corresponding marketing lead at those companies to come up with more dedicated campaigns to drive awareness to a specific platform, because every customer is unique and the platforms know a little bit better their customer than, let's say, we do. We know our customers that watch the shows that engage with our social really well. So it's just, again, it's being thoughtful and tactical about what the mission is of driving awareness and why.
Excellent. Todd, to you, we had a great conversation around the importance of the EPG, of metadata. One of my reports a few quarters back talked about channel surfing. I think we often forget that that's actually still a behavior, right? So if you're channel surfing and the be right backs are up there, that's a problem. That's one thing. The other thing is, and I asked you this dead on, I'm like, hey, how many publishers, what percentage of publishers are actually supplying you the metadata, imagery, et cetera, that you want to see in your EPG so that it's the best possible experience? And I'll let you take it from there as to how many you estimated were doing that.
Yeah, it's depressingly low. I would say probably 25% of our publishers across the few thousand channels we have are giving us enough of the metadata we need. And it's great stuff as in, what the actual airings are and what they are and descriptions of the airings, even up to things like cover art. We probably have 5 or 6 different metadata sources that we have to pull together. Now, Plex as a whole, a big part of our brand promise is to have as much information on all content, no matter where it is. But that means that we're doing a ton of work to try and match what we're getting from the EPG to what we already have. And then that starts getting us to run into other kinds of rights, because as both Laura or Aaliyah can attest to, they'd like to have control over what we're showing around their content, which doesn't necessarily always match what we're getting from a Grace Note or someone else. So
yeah, I think your quote to me in the prep was metadata is a mess, which
yes,
I like.
It is.
You have a lot of those. Abhishek, this is for you. And I'll simplify it just to this one. How are you grappling with EPG, metadata, et cetera? Like how much energy, effort, et cetera, inside your company are you thinking about giving these guys the cleanest, best source of metadata? And let me ask you to dive in a little bit to Gracenote and other providers, that market, and whether we need to kind of unlock a little bit more competition there. What's your take on all that?
Oh, sure. Metadata has always been a big challenge as far as distributing it to multiple platforms, each of which have their own unique requirements, and also like the metadata itself on a certain program could be different depending on the region or where you're distributing it to. For example, ratings could be different in US versus Europe.
Like, do you get the executive internal call ever? I mean, this guy worked in sports. I think there's actually an audience that we all have to be aware of. It's like the guy who owns the franchise who now is like looking at some, right? Does that happen? I can imagine people are looking and watching and calling in like this is never going to get tuned into because the metadata is wrong on the title.
Yeah, I mean, we have a pretty vocal audience. I mean, who never hesitates to let us know if something's wrong. So, yeah, so like I said, I mean, like even like on the metadata itself, I mean, like there's some platforms like say specify have like word limits or like certain lengths and things like that on certain descriptions or title, certain characters not being allowed. So, it's pretty fragmented out there, and the challenge is just trying to handle it, appropriately.
So, Aliyah, let's jump to you. Let's talk about the money a little bit. We have an industry that's just getting started. As I mentioned before we got on here, like I was at a live ramp conference and asked quite a few people about fast, and still a lot of people in the kind of bigger advertising world, they don't even know what I'm talking about. And you in particular have had some really good efforts to deploy audience extension, and you've had a little bit of a, I'll just call it a little bit of a spat with Trade Desk. I'd love it. I don't think a lot of people know a lot about this, to just dive into what's happened here. What were you trying to do and accomplish with this audience extension? Why do you think that they were saying, no, that's not what we're going to allow?
Yeah. So first, we've been in this space for a really long time. We've been working with advertisers since 2017, even though we started in 2016 with our O&O. We've been working with advertisers for a really long time. And the conversation always is, we need more skill, we need more skill, we need more skill. And the advertisers who understand, Reverie focuses specifically on LGBTQ and allied audiences. Those advertisers who know that it's important to reach those markets or reach that audience in order to grow their market, their conversation with us has always been scale, 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 scale. And so, back in maybe about 2 years ago or so, we launched Prism Riot, which is our ad exchange. And with that ad exchange, we actually are able to expand out our audience specifically across CTV and FAST all over. We've got partners literally all over. One of our partners is on the call right now, Todd. And for us with that audience, it's not, we don't even really think of it as audience extension as much. It's really, it's an ad exchange. Our partners come to us, they want to be able to reach this audience, which is contextually identified for us as LGBTQ or allied across all of these places on CTV. The problem is if you are working with Trade Desk in particular, and you try to work with Reverie and Prism Riot in this way, Trade Desk basically said, no, we're not allowing that because in our eyes, we've categorized them in a very specific way. We actually don't operate in that specific way because one, we're not just going in and tapping into all of our partners' broad audience. We are specifically targeting our audience on our partners' platforms. Additionally, we have direct relationships and direct contracts with each of these partners. So when our partners, our brand partners, go to Trade Desk and say they want to work with us, they essentially tell them no. When we go back and we ask them, hey, why are you telling them no? What's going on? This isn't the way that you traditionally categorize a reseller. We're not operating that way. Their response to us is, well, you could just buy our product and give us your data, and then we'll be able to have LGBTQ audience data that we then can sell these partners, and we'll give you a rev share.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. See, yeah. I mean, it seems so, for lack of a better word, greedy in terms of like, there's so many different niches out there. Like, really?
Absolutely.
Like, and you, I assume also have hashed emails or you have some first party data around your audience, would you say, or how does that
Absolutely,
work?
but it's protected and we have it
Right.
very, very secure. That's also a really important part of this, is
Right.
that especially in this political environment, privacy and data specifically for our audience is incredibly important. And so for us, no, we're not just going to give it away. Our audience has trusted us. We protect that data. We're not just going to go sell it off for a quick buck.
Yeah. Laura, I actually, let me just put a shout out to IAB. Part of what we want to cover in this panel is how there needs to be more standardization in the fast space. I see a question here. Is there a way that we can get more standardization from metadata, EPG? And one of the things that I just learned about yesterday was this an initiative by IAB called the Ad Hero Format Initiative, in which they're trying to standardize some of the things that we all hear talked about. Picture-in-picture ads, brand bugs, Astons, pause ads for those platforms that do have pause, shoppable ads with the QR code. So I just want to kind of put it out there. We have IAB, they're doing some standards work. There needs to be more involvement of, I guess, of these fast players, but that's a really long-winded wind-up for you, Laura, of like, which of these do you think could take off? There's like these, into queue, transmit, picture in picture. That's a really interesting idea, right? That's one. And then there's pause ads, which you actually see on like DirecTV and big scale platforms. Fubo launching its own version of these things. So, I mean, take that where you will with both the problems that's of scale, but also just what your gut is about like what might be an effective ad in this space.
It's interesting as a publisher across all of these partner platforms, in addition to having our own broadcast network, right? So we have carte blanche on our broadcast network to do what is best for the engagement with our audience and scalable with our advertising partners, right? And so we do a lot of innovative formats on our broadcast network. It's been really interesting to try and navigate all of these different requirements and scale cost, having one feed that goes to all these partners, right? And what they will and won't allow. So standardization would help us a lot. And I think just speaking to the overall market, monetization is so low, right? Fill rates are at historic lows, as are CPMs. Finding really engaging formats that aren't just adding more ads to an ad pod is important, right? So for us, I think it's whatever the platforms and all of us can decide is standard that can also be automated, right? A lot of these additional formats are very manual right now, and there are all these pioneering new efforts to actually engage in a programmatic ad stack, a way that you could have these graphic overlays and other things, and you can automate actually inserting an advertiser into that space, and they can buy it programmatically, which takes the work off us, additional revenue that can be put through a programmatic ad stack that we can share with the platform. So genuinely, I'm kind of agnostic to it, to be honest, because I think each platform as well should pick what the best experience is for their customer. Pluto sees an older customer base. We're seeing Amazon being a little bit younger or broader. Roku's really broad. So I just say is like, our job as the publisher is to provide these first in class feeds, and we're happy to do any of these formats, but we do need to start really getting into the nitty gritty of this right now, which is, what are the standards going to be? How do we get them executed? But yeah, I don't have an answer for what the best one is yet, because I think it's definitely platform by platform.
So, let me come back to you on another thing. We didn't actually cover this, but like thinking about this, like I mentioned to the panelists before, I was at Live Ramp yesterday, and so my head's in a slightly different space. You are a first-party publisher. You must have a fair amount of data, right? And it does seem to me like, hey, I could spend all this time on like picture-in-picture, this, that, or the other, or I could find a category, a brand category where there's a lot of money pouring in because it's a new, whatever, like on the ground level, there's growth there. And it seemed to me like that environment now, like, hey, my data's in your clean room, you're coming in. Oh, here's this third party brand provider that actually has a linkage with the kinds of brands that want to buy on my type of content. How much of this are you digging into? Like, yeah, actually more work needs to be done in that data side, do you think? As opposed to like formats, right? Where you really have direct sales team out putting together more creative offers around like, look, here's who's viewing this channel. We know this. Here's the advertisers that are coming in here, just based on the data providers and the clean room and all this type of stuff that you'll see with LiveRamp. Is that in your orbit at all?
Yeah, on our site. So this has been the fun part, is we've been able to create our own ad sales team, right? And what's really important for everyone that sells in this space now is to be in the data loop. My counterpart that runs our advertising division talks about this a lot. And part of the reason why is because you can see what brands are buying in real time, right? And also, I think we each complement each other. Me as the publisher who sits in the production team that literally makes the content on a daily basis, I can provide with our brand partnerships team this huge opportunity of making new content with us, current content, bespoke content. Pampers, if you're our number one buyer, I can create assets for you and execute them in all these thoughtful ways across social, YouTube, our fast channels, doesn't really matter. So that's the important part right now, is the landscape has changed from a broadcaster and a publisher being the only one really controlling that stream to now having to share that infrastructure with our platform partners, which we should, right? I don't know the platform. I don't know all the optimization. I don't have that full journey necessarily that the platform does, but together we
Right.
can sell at 100%. The challenge right now has been educating the market that we can do both. We can both win 100% of the inventory. Plus, you can split that ad pod 4 ways, right? So that's, I think, the next journey for all of us is we each do something really well. And as a partnership, we actually complement each other. I'm not competing trying to sell the same thing I'm trying to sell Family Feud. You're trying to sell your platform, your opportunity, and your audience. Different things. I see
Yeah.
Aaliyah. Yeah, a high five, homie. Like we're right there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do it. Aaliyah,
Yeah.
why don't you jump off of that, and then I'll go to Todd on a similar question there, but add to it.
Yeah, no, and the thing is, like for us, we sell LGBTQ better than anybody else. Like we know our market, we are constantly in the trenches, we know what the data is, we know what our partners want to see, we understand how to talk to them around this. At the end of the day, our partner platforms really are selling, to Laura's point, they're selling their platform. They are saying, here's our audience in general. Here's what we're doing in general. Come in and buy in general on our platform. We are selling our channel. We are talking to the folks who specifically have made a decision and said, we want this audience in this way. And truth of the matter is, at the end of the day, I'm going to sell that for a much higher CPM than our partners ever will, because we're giving them exactly what they want. Whereas they're, as opposed to being like, we'll throw it, see, throw some stuff at the wall and see what sticks. And maybe we hit exactly what you're trying to do. I also want to say that, like, we have our O&O, so we can do anything our partners really want to be able to do. But at the end of the day, if there's no standardization across the board with the platforms as well, we're in a bit of a pickle, because we may know that this works really great on our platform, really great on our O&O, but if our platforms are focused only on one type of form that's really working for their audience, it's incredibly disjointed. There's a lot of standardization that is not taking place in the industry. And so I love the idea of doing these hero unit standardization, but I think across the board, there's so much more that has to happen. So it's a step in the
And one of the keys, as Laura mentioned, is owning the SSAI and the CDM piece of it. Todd, we talked a little bit about SSAI, and your one-word response was excruciating. So tell us a little more about how critical the SSAI is. You do see a little bit of innovation here and there, but I guess you have to have the SSAI, you have the CDM, and also if you really want to be creative, I guess you have to have not only the main ad server, but you may even have to have like multiple ad servers keeping up with what's happening. You also made a great point. I want you to dive in a little bit why this is so challenging. You have 45% of the inventory, but you don't necessarily know which ad at an existing moment is part of your 45% or not. So take that where you will.
Right. Yeah, I think there's a number of things that play together. Building on exactly what Aaliyah and Laura said, there's fantastic opportunities to do these really interesting and creative things. And the economics of the ad space right now are requiring us to figure out ways to significantly increase the value of that inventory. And the way that's going to come is through targeting, through data, through creative ad formats, innovative ways of doing that work. When I sit at my side, I would absolutely love, and we actually do some of these with actually Abhishek and Elia and Laura. We are doing a bunch of different experiments, but getting more closely to your question, the content provider is who chooses the SSAI provider, not us. So, we have fantastic relationships with almost all of the top studios and brands, which means I have a half a dozen to 8 different SSAI stacks that I'm trying to integrate with. Back to the EPG question, very different styles of data that's coming in, very different capabilities of the kind of creative ad formats that we can run. And as a platform ourselves, we're also investing, whether it's pause ads or interactive or transactional ads. But it's difficult for us to say, okay, we're going to invest heavily in doing transactional because I have to not only make agreements with the Fremantles of the world to make sure it's okay to run those transactionals on their content, but I also am dependent on the SSAI stacks like Amagi or Whirl to actually be able to implement that technology. So we end up in this very sparsely populated inventory when we're trying to sell these higher end, kind of creatives. So
and then
can I just Todd on that? I think that's where what's been interesting for us is, Roku and Samsung and the others have taken control over SSAI and CDN for those particular reasons, right? And limits us in visibility and it limits us, but it allows for optimal uptime and performance for the platform because you have one unified supply chain that you can actually see and control, but you have to like take all that work on across all of it. So like there's really like big pros and cons, right? With
Yeah.
Well, and then I'll whine
Yeah.
because I'm also on every platform. So
right, you're
how I
right.
have
You
to
have all
interact
those
with
different
Roku is
specs.
different than Fire, which is different than
Yeah.
Samsung, which is different than
Right.
iOS. Yeah.
And then just to get a little bit geeky, right? Like when I talk to very senior executives, there's actually even still a core fundamental problem here where the timing of these flows, like when you hit play on a VOD asset, I got to fill ads that might not come for 10 or 15 minutes. This is as far as I understand for some of these players. And so there's this idea of like, well, if you could just give me more time. And then lo and behold, I think maybe at IBC, you had Theo, which is a player. YoSpace has a player. They have come up with something built on Apple's HLS interstitial. This is a standard Apple HLS interstitial. And up comes a new buzzword called server guided ad insertion. I prefer to call hybrid ad insertion. Unfortunately, this provides some solutions, but it's again going to be something that the platforms have to kind of be involved with. And it's the seamlessness of SSAI with the real-time targeting and insertion capability of a client side. You had a quote on that was a preview. Tell us a little bit. I know you're monitoring it. It's still super early. I've just learned about this in the last 6 months, but what's your take on how important that's going to be coming into the future?
So I think solving the problem is going to be very important going into the future. And whether it's server guided, it's the zero slate or there's a bunch of different ways we're trying to solve it. We all know that kind of the slate itself is a really bad user experience. There are some partners that we have that have done a great job of at least having entertaining slate. So it's not a we'll be right back. It's our cooking shows have the little quick snippets. But especially as we start talking about these more interesting and more creative formats, transactional, unless you're doing QR codes, and I know I'm not a big fan of QR codes, especially on TV, you have to have client-side interaction. So trying to figure that out of how do you have that kind of hybrid relationship is really important. The problem is explicitly with FAST, and I'll bet you Laura feels this greatly, one of the benefits to the publisher on the upstream side of FAST is it's a single stream that they can run. Right. We talked about the complaints about the EPG. You look at something like Amagi's doing where you kind of shrink the ad pods. You've now instantly taken all that out of sync. And so what does my EPG look like for somebody who had less fill? How do we do catch up?
The Amagi stuff doesn't desync from the EPG. That at least the Z slate, the way that we've set it up with them is that it'll essentially keep to the slate, right? Or whatever the EPG
but it'll be
slate
backfilling
is.
The end of the program, right? So
if we decide to, you could turn it on or off. Yeah, but we thought about that with them when we were helping develop it.
It's actually, this is a super interesting conversation because there is some gray area and some tipping points. Like, wait, if it's just going to be a personalized feed, right? Like, it's very old school to think about, whoa, it's a block. We have to have this many, but like that's linear. It's tune in a day.
Exactly.
That's the right.
Yeah.
So there's like a limit. You could do some, but not too much. And then, by the way, there's also a bigger argument of like personalization in general is something that the social platforms are really good at. So it's hard to sort of imagine, right?
Todd, you had talked about doing a VOD personalized feed, right?
Yeah, and we do. And there's a couple things we do. So we have the VOD personalized feed. I mean, it is not at the one-to-one level where we'd love to get it to, but it is certainly more dynamic. And then there's simple things that we do, and I'm pretty sure we do it with Abhishek as well, of the start from beginning. So once, having a VOD asset alongside the FAST asset, so if somebody tunes in mid-show, they can click out and start from the beginning.
Start over. Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. Abhishek, do you want to dive into that? That's really an important point.
Yeah, I mean, like I agree with that, Todd. Like I think the easier problems to solve would be how can we make the solution better? I mean, like how can we achieve greater fill rates, right? More than like the types of ad formats. To me, it comes down to like having greater contextual ads is something that we value. Bill was talking about watching a History Channel show on like food, like for example. I mean, how can we show like more McDonald's ads or something like that, right? And and the second thing is how do I personalize these ads in addition to showing it, making it more contextual. And for that we also want to leverage all the first party data that we're collecting through our O&O apps. You were talking about live ramp, so we could conceive hopefully use the live ramp IDs and tie the user across, going from O&O, watching something on fast, and then hopefully target them better in that way.
Yeah. Aaliyah, you have your owned and operated app. You have your fast channels being distributed in that kind of traditional ecosystem. And then the other thing you have is a YouTube channel, right?
Yeah.
Which I always like. There were some great customers. We did certain portions of the workflow, but like, Live Now on Fox was like, wow, that thing started on YouTube and it's now, sure, you can find it on Fast. But tell us a little bit about how those three things differ. Obviously, like in the app, you can do cool ad stuff. On YouTube, there's actually real money coming in. Help us understand like how you balance the brand and the channel of programming across those three different
Yeah, I
platforms.
mean, at the end of the day, for us, it's about figuring out the best way to talk to our audience where they are. I think everyone understands that, like, your audience may be completely different on YouTube versus your audience may be completely different on O&O versus on Fast, right? Our O&O like viewer is someone who like saw Reverie, saw the brand, was like, this is me, this is for me. I am a super fan, I am a super user, I am downloading this, I am watching this. I am Reverie, right? Your fast channel maybe just be someone who's like scrolling through and you happen to come across a movie that you're like, oh my God, I haven't seen this in forever. Oh, I love this. This is now someone who's like, wait, what is this? Like, I want to come back. They've got stuff that I want to watch. Oh, it's got a queer lens. I never thought of it from that perspective, but now I'm looking at it from there and they've got content I want to watch, right? YouTube is somewhat similar. I mean, we look at the new stats that are coming out around like, more people are watching YouTube on their television versus on mobile, right? So YouTube really is and always has been a distribution point and a real true distribution point. But I think now that we're really seeing that data where people are actually watching on television in that way, that's how we're operating. We're putting our originals up on there. We're, playing with putting up our live sort of fast feeds in the YouTube environment as well. Because just because you're watching Reverie on YouTube doesn't necessarily mean that you've been to the O&O. And so we want to give you that experience. You may never have watched Reverie on Fast, but we want to be able to give you that experience because now you're going, oh, wait, I can watch it like this too. Let me go dig in because our goal is to get everybody to get into O&O. So all of these places need to feed in there.
I love that because I think we were making this argument about YouTube. It's essentially the most open platform for content owners to understand who's watching, to control our own data without all the technical hubbub, right? And there's a reason why YouTube is like 20% of the market right now, right? It's just like there's a lot of barriers that platforms want to control. And it's like, let content owners empower people that want to watch. Like, let us do more. Like, we're putting a ton of restrictions in place. And it's just you're seeing that the YouTubes of the world are continuing to grow because they make it very accessible for people to put up things that people want to watch. And then to your point, if you want to get deeper into our fandom, then you can travel to these other places for different experiences. But yeah, just echoing, like, it is a pretty interesting comparison when you look at like the challenges we're being presented in other places and we're not on YouTube.
Totally.
This is great. Let's jump into QR codes. I know not everybody loves them. They are somewhat ubiquitous now. And I do want to just broach the subject of, speaking of YouTube, I saw recently during a YouTube TV, so this is a vMVPD environment, mind you, where during a pod that actually came up one question, and it was clearly for the media team, and they're asking me a viewership question. I've had an idea for a while, sparked by Michael Nagel at Gannett, and he was talking about data like 2 years ago. I was like, well, don't you do reader audience surveys? Like, yeah. I'm like, well, why don't you just throw up a QR code and just gather a little bit of data? It's not quantitative, but you just get a little flavor maybe for your ad sales team. And since that it's been 2 years. I've asked a whole bunch of people this, right? And it's really fascinating to get the different responses. And so I'll give you guys all a chance to figure out. So one is sort of like, yeah, I could do better be right backs, but it's still a pay to program them in the thing in my playout system, right? Amagi World, et cetera. They don't make it easy to dynamically update those things. Another's like QR codes, and I've heard, well, actually, we do use a QR code, but it's like to download the app. So there's a little bit of that kind of activity. And then there's also some that like was referenced earlier that are doing a little bit more innovative stuff. Like I think some of the Bitcoin types of channels, like they're putting in live Bitcoin prices, et cetera. So, and I'm going to go across to all of you. What are you guys doing? What have you done? What's your take on the idea of at the very least, I need to make the Be Right Backs more interesting and bring people through the break. And I'll just say one last thing on my soapbox. We in this business look at that as lost revenue. So it's like really upsetting to us. What's upsetting to the consumer actually is not if you have a decent Be Right Back. Like I don't think and I've done research on this multiple times. I don't think they find that annoying. So what do you think? What have you done with respect to Be Right Backs to try to make the experience better for consumers? And I'll start with you, Aaliyah.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the beginning, we've always tried to make our Be Right Backs really engaging because we're always thinking about this from the perspective of like, we watch TV, we have these experiences, we know what it looks like when it's just like a plain screen and it's like, be right back, and maybe you get a counter and maybe you don't, and it's boring. And we've always been very specific around creating video content for our Be Right Back that is engaging. So you're not just staring at a screen and super, super boring. And it's super funny you mentioned the QR code thing because like quick sort of aside and story, when we first launched our business in 2016, we all went up to San Francisco Pride and we're like in Dolores Park wearing t-shirts with QR codes. And the number of people who were like, what's that? What's a QR code? I don't get it. And now the world is so different. So to even be having this conversation, like, how are you using QR codes? I can literally say from the beginning of our business, we've had QR codes on pink t-shirts in Dolores Park trying to get folks to even be like, let me show you how to do this, right? I think they're tricky because like people either you have to, if you're watching on your television, you got to grab your phone and hope you can catch it quick enough and see if it makes sense. I don't like to use it as an end all be all. I just don't think it makes sense. From a customer data perspective, we've used them. But we've also done social media stories. We've also done newsletter surveys. We've also done different ways because what you have to realize is some parts of your audience are just not going to engage that way. They might be just wanting that lean back experience, which is why they're coming to Fast to just turn their television on and let their TV work for them. They don't necessarily want to go grab their phone and now go do some work. So yeah.
Abhishek, you have a ton of content. We talked a little bit about how AI is helping you dig up great content, connect different things from different series. I'm mindful that also would be great Be Right Back content, right? What have you done or seen or talked about internally that's super interesting around, hey, at least we can either try to monetize or at least make it more interesting?
Yeah, I mean, to me, some of the ideas that we've been debating things like, having like, sneak peeks and exclusive behind the scenes content, which might not be shown on the main program, but, you could conceivably use the QR code, go into our own and operated app, and then that could be another way of driving traffic back to our O&O apps. That's an option. Then you could have like more interactivity, I guess. Polls and things like that we sometimes run. That that could potentially be used over there.
Todd, I'm going to go to you on this one and a little bit of a hardball, right? Because when I talk about this topic in general, a lot of people, well, Brian, Pluto does a pretty good job cross-promoting, right? I remember having one dialogue with one customer. They were talking about IMDb and Freevee, and I remember watching the channel and being like, yes, it looks like they're filling all your ads, but like there's a few Amazon products that are popping up quite a bit. Right. So for you, Todd, how much is that? I understand you're in a unique environment where you really want to give content the control, but what about the idea of like, yeah, we're going to run, because you are a platform, we're going to run this middle layer. Like if you can't fill at least we're going to run a promo from another channel on the Plex app. Are you doing stuff like that?
We do. So there's two things we try to do. And again, I think Abhishek said that the answer number one is increase improve fill, right? Remove the opportunity for slate. We do run promos. There's two challenges we have, and a lot of them are tune-in promos, or that we do some explainer promos of, here's how our product works, why you need to come back to Plex. The two challenges are on the cross promotion. We have to be very careful on, promoting a competitor's channel while running on A&E or running on, Reverie. And the second is the variable timing, right? You and I had chatted a little bit about AI and how can AI help us with this. If we had the ability, today I have to produce a 22-second and a 15-second and an 8-second and a 3-second spot so that I can intelligently fill the rest of the pod. We would love to start experimenting with, can we generate, here's the kind of assets we want. I now know that there's 11 seconds left in the pod. Give me the 11-second version. And by the way, in by 50 milliseconds, so I have time to return it so that it can get stitched in. Those are things, to me, I think are the easier. Honestly, it sounds crazy, but that's kind of the easier answer. Yeah, I think that's the best we can do. And again, we have the situation, like I said, we've got hundreds of partners that we need to make sure we're doing them justice across all of it. Sometimes we even get assets actually from our partners, right? So, A&E has given us stuff. The other thing we do is backfill, right? So in a lot of cases, these are inventory splits. And I think that's what drives my team insane, is we'll get complaints about, a lot of slate. And then when we finally dig into it, the slate is actually coming because the partner failed to fill their inventory on that pod. So ours might be full, but the consumer doesn't care. The consumer has no idea that it was SportsGrid who failed to fill that pod, not Plex. Actually, that's a bad example. We sell all theirs. So being able to bring in, I think, Abhishek, you and I have done some of that work. We've got backfill going with A&E. It helps, right? We just don't have as much time. So a lot of the optimization we can do to make sure we are filling, if it's that last ditch effort, like, oh no, we're not going to fill the pod, Plex, help us.
Right. No, Laura, what about to you? Because I do have this kind of idea of like, hey, let's just stay. Sorry, let me just be a big picture about this. There's some of these vendors out there, right? We'll think about the fast providers that like they would like to be in the big leagues, like I was at Live Ramp, right? But like that's just not where they are. They're playing in the little leagues right now. And my thought has always been like, okay, let's kill it in the little league. There must be ways to get brands involved and start to build up. And in that context, the amount, if you look across your 100 plus channels, like the amount of the amount of slate, right, is actually a massive scale. And I wonder if there's any sense. I had a big media guy come to me and be like, this is a complicated problem. Can't you just bring a few brands in and like, let's just solve the whole thing. I'll give you all my slate. It'll be branded, co-branded, you and me together, etc. Any big conversations at Fremantle of like, look, we're going to keep on the programmatic side. It's obviously where our destiny lies, but we might as well try to pick up this additional remnant slate or what have you. What's your take on that? Is there a way to push some attention to remnant and backfill and at least build it up over time to be more effective?
So to take a step back, right? When you look at how the waterfall runs, and again, every platform is different. This is not a simple solution at all. And if it was just with one platform, we could figure it out. Todd, I love the idea of like, there's all these AI tools out here now too that could like auto generate from an approved set of assets, a 3, a 5, an 11. Like there's all types of tools we could do for one platform based on your build and your problems. There is not one holistic solution where I could bring in a brand and do this across the stream. Part of it too is the requirements that we are provided from someone as large as a Roku that would dominate the feed requirement, right? It makes it really, really challenging to solve this problem. And from my platform days, you could see definitively when a customer would abandon in the middle of when the ad pod failed and it reverts to a slate. Now, listen, there are some people that do it really well, right? I think Tastemade has an amazing slate when they're around to run it because it's just this ASMR cool way to just like watch delicately cooking, right? We saw Cops, they were just playing an episode in a picture-in-picture. That worked really well. So the question is, will the platform allow it? Number one. A Be Right Back bug is not compelling. It just tells you the feed's not broken, right? The right thing to do, higher level, is simply just the ad pod collapses if you can't fill it, right? But the technology currently doesn't allow us to do it. And that's why Z Slate was so cool, but you have to control CDN and SSAI. So that's one thing. I don't think we should just be forcing ads to force them, genuinely. We can make the slate better, but in general, I mean, the ad pod should collapse. So I think it's one of those things where like I'm taking a by platform approach of like, of course, we're going to be in the inventory position. Just to take the second part of your question, when you look at an ad waterfall, remnant and backfill inventory, we might get 100 million calls, only 5% of those actually fill. It's super inefficient. Backfill isn't great, right? To Todd's point too, if the partner's not doing their job on either side of filling the inventory, it won't matter. And you can bring down the price of the overall inventory in the market. So these are complex situations. I think this is where what you need to look at is, do you have premium partners that can sell and understand their inventory and can fill it? Number one. And number two, on the platform side too, can they do the same? And if they can't, what is their average fill rate and what's happening and why? And then the third part is, will you work with us on the foundation of like, if they collapse and nothing is in there, what can we do for the best experience? Only the platform can tell me too. When do they abandon? What is the best, right? So it's like, we got to attack all three of those things. We
Yeah,
got to do
I
it
guess
together.
so let me come back to you, and this is a bigger theme thing, and I think we talked about this a little bit in the prep of like, okay, we know there's a couple of big gorillas, like if Roku would do it, if Samsung. I'm also interested in your take. There are some good citizens. Plex is a good citizen. Vizio is a good citizen. Like, and I guess it's those two, but maybe you could name others where, yeah, maybe there's a way to get a certain kind of scale. No, it's not going to be Roku scale, but it's going to be enough, like a Vizio, like a Plex, where it's enough of an environment that could at least prove to advertisers of these new things. Or do we need Roku and need Samsung? Do we need the big guys to make this happen? Is there any second tier, or like, do you know what I mean? That we can
Yeah. So
bootstrap a solution here without Roku.
Yeah, so right now in the market, typically in order to launch a channel, you will realistically need a Roku or a Samsung or an Amazon to dictate a positive ROI P&L, right? It is just the fact of life. It is their scale, right? So because of that, if you are scaling for optimal cost and reach, probably you will need them, right, to come up with a solution. Listen, there's tons of ways we can come up with innovative solutions. And if we find even cheaper ways too to get the stream out the door and we can customize, we're always working towards that as well. But realistically, in this market, probably.
It's really just back to the central theme, I guess, of all of this which we've all talked about. Cable, hugely successful business. Scuddy in technical organization. Here's how ads should work. We have nothing like that in the fast space. Similarly on broadcast, SMPTE. Here's how this stuff can work. I think that's a fair statement, correct? We do not have even the great well-named Z Slate, all this great stuff. Like, it has to be that all providers come together and say, hey, here's how we're going to execute this XYZ as an industry. Would you agree with that?
I think what we are seeing, and what's kind of like since my days of DVD, is consolidation will happen again, right? Is the best experience will win. There can't be this many providers out there, and people are gonna combine. You already saw it with Fubo and Disney and Hulu, and like it's all gonna start happening, right? So if we're just thinking about customer experience first, does a VOD playlist that's personalized solve this, right? Like, not great for the publisher necessarily, right? Because there's unique things that can constantly react to and provide, but it solves that problem, like organically, just soup to nuts, right? So I don't, from my perspective, by the way, I think this is a more complicated issue because there already are solves out there, but it also takes away some of our strength of providing a custom experience within a feed. So that is a complicated question.
And that's, I think what's interesting is that's the place where being, the publisher versus the platform ends up being either conflicting or, complementary. From our perspective, what I see is, yes, content is king, but what's really driving content is discovery. The problem, and I think the reason we see consolidation for the end user, is reality is a lot of them don't even know where they watch stuff. They know what they want to watch. and where they find that. I mean, again, I'm very selfish about this. This is a huge part of the Plex strategy, is really solving that kind of discovery problem. But where that puts us is somewhat at odds, to your point exactly, because to really how I'm going to win in an engagement game and get this, get our social aspect going, is that brand guarantee that I'm going to promote whatever content you want to watch, even if it's not on our platform, right? We will drive installs, we will drive subs if that's what makes the most compelling thing for the user. And you kind of brought up the dynamic feeds that we're trying to build. It's going to be across all content because it's based on what that user wants to consume, right? And I think that becomes a challenge. We have to go there because that's what's going to make us stand out, and especially as an independent, right? We're not Pluto, we're not Tubi, we're not owned by a studio house, we're not Amazon who's going to try and push their content. But every one of our partners like you doesn't necessarily want us putting, Baywatch next to Real Housewives, or even if that's exactly the right answer for our user. In a VOD world, it happens,
Right.
because that the user gets to choose. But in a fast lean back experience,
Right.
how do you solve that?
So listen, this is a really good touch point. I'm going to you, Aaliyah, on this. Is this idea, and again, I was at Amagi for a few years. There's different ways to do a fast channel, right? You can do what we would call like a linear real, what I would promote when I was at Amagi, a real fast channel. It's encoded, real time, driving the graphics. Of course, that was the Cadillac, and I can't tell you how many times people was like, "I don't need your Cadillac, Brian. It's too expensive." And over time, I did become increasingly convinced that this idea of a manifest manipulation version of fast, a la Pluto and a la what you have just mentioned, I think Laura talking about the VOD playlisting, is another way to do it, right? And it maybe just fast needs to be lower cost, and maybe this personalization. I have a question here about personalization and how important that is. So Aaliyah, a little bit interested for you to dive into this, because you told me about how important day parting is and stripping and programming, right? So how do what are you today? Are you a live channel using all that good stuff? Or are you also, maybe you're both, but like finding that you can do some of that stuff with manifest manipulation as well? Take that where you will. If you're advising another fast channel when they're launching, what's your response to that hard sell from Amagi or Frequency or whatever, that you need
Yeah,
live graphics?
Yeah, listen, I think you start out and you just get out there, right? So whatever's going to be the easiest way for you to get out there and then look at data and figure out and see what's going to make sense. For us, we do day parting. We have, our head of programming comes from traditional like linear television and is creating, we're eventizing the experience. We have a live, sort of live experience of our watching on our fast channels across the board, because for us, we're trying to eventize it, right? We have right now we've got an scripted original series that every Tuesday it is on television across all of our channels. You are consistently, wherever you're watching a Reverie fast channel, for the most part, you're going to watch that specific show. That means on our side, we get to market, hey, everybody, Tuesday evening, go watch our show Unconventional. All of our, cast and the production company and everyone else also gets to now have that same messaging. So it creates an eventized experience, which for us works really well because community is such a big part of it. Being able to talk to each other, being able to interact around content is really important. And you see that actually being super important generationally for Gen Z. They are very much into the community aspect of, if they're watching something, it needs to be an event. So for us, having a simple like VOD playlist doesn't necessarily work, because that doesn't mean they're going to be able to have that same experience together.
Right. And it's a segue also to you, Laura, about the tag board graphics, HTML5 graphics. There are various players out there, and these are really fun, interesting experiences. I know you're thinking and exploring these kinds of things. You want to say a little bit about the relationship with tag board? I suppose that's also coming from the social media side, being that they've got such a big presence in social media, engaging TV audiences. You want to take that a little further about what you might be doing in the future around interactivity and audience engagement?
Yeah, I think, there's sports, and then there's things like live and game that, we have a ton of experience in as a company in general, with American Idol and America's Got Talent and all of these big brand IPs that we have. plus all the activation we have with social. So our social team really spearheaded the relationship with Tagboard with a lot of tests, but really simple, innovative overlays that can plug in directly into social, gorgeous graphics that can also include like a lot of great mock-ups we can do for advertisers to, plug them in. I think the biggest part is just one, are they authenticated with your playout partner for fast, right? And then how do you scale and automate those where they're not manual? We do QR codes now, we do lower thirds, we do all that stuff. It is much, much more manual than I'd like to see, right? Knowing again, this day and age with AI, it should be much, much faster. So, but these things are important, right? Because they enhance engagement with the stream. And for us, we had like a 96% play along rate with our channel buzzer when we last polled our customer audience. So it's not for every channel, right? Will it work as well for my Jamie Oliver channel? Yeah, for cooking and recipes and things, it's a different type of experience. We had talked about this earlier though for QR codes. When you look at how a customer multitasks, there's a new report that just came across my desk this morning. 32 hours a day are how much people consume media because they are multitasking. The majority of that multitasking has happened while they're watching or listening to media and on their phone doing social media and e-commerce, right? So we have to start thinking about this dynamic interactivity that's already happening with the customers. The cool thing for us is because we're one of the few categories where you can engage, interactive gaming is the future of our business. We already have an entire gaming team that does an amazing job. We've got like new live shows that you can actually play along with in real time that actually spin a wheel and you can do things right with. So this is the future for us. The question just is, again, who and how can we partner with our platform partners to do this? Because it's not something we can necessarily I can do it on my broadcast channel all day long.
Right.
But how do I interact and optimize with my platform partner for this enhanced experience that I will provide through my stream with the customer that will require a second screen engagement, right? It will require a mobile engagement.
And I will say too, I have, again, to pop up, my report from last quarter was the remote control is like twice as preferred for these kinds of experiences. And then you really do need the platform if you're doing e-commerce transactions, things like this. Not that the second screen's not great. We're all sitting there on the second screen. So there's obviously an interesting use case there. But people do, as David Bloom said on this Zoomcast, he's like, yeah, they're holding it like a gun, ready to take action, So that's kind of an important element.
I would argue though, like I haven't used an actual controller. Like for the last 5 years, I have used my either Roku remote on my phone. I do it on my Google TV now. I say that too because my kids consistently lose my remote control, and they 100% have it on they have all of the apps on their iPad. So like I would challenge that a lot actually because the controller probably is on your phone.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I don't believe that they're mutually exclusive, because there's a lot of functionality we build into our apps, which are single click, simple remote actions that can drive interactivity on the mobile device. I mean, reality is these days, everybody has a phone sitting next to them. I mean, it is amazing how often even if they're watching big screen, their phone's there. To your point, Laura, they may be doing something different. If you can trigger that, and Brian knows this, I'm not a fan of QR codes, but if you can trigger that connection in some very simple way from a remote click to then it showing up on your phone, that's where I think we see the adoption. I mean, YouTube has their send a phone. It's interesting. I have no idea what the stats are on how well that works.
Right.
But we haven't had a watch list button for content that is really powerful. Right. It is amazing when somebody sees a trailer, they add to watch list, there's like a 4x, watch time following that. And then having that be able to pull information up on the Plex app on their phone, we start to see that. So I think there are places in Laura that fits perfectly with the kind of stuff you guys do, right? I mean, you have a very engaging reason for beyond just, well, who's that guy on that scene?
Right.
It's play along.
Listen, guys, we're a minute down. I just want one final question to you, Abhishek, focused on this particular topic. Are you seeing doing anything in the interactivity section? I say that being this, you have history fans and buffs, the history trivia game on Fast. Are we going to see that in the next year or what?
I hope so. Particularly things like this day in history and things of that nature. I mean, like there's a lot of opportunity there, and we hope to work with our partners, our vendors, as well as players like Todd, to push out new features.
Awesome, awesome. Listen, thank you guys so much. That's Todd Hay, Abhishek Neralla, Aaliyah Daniels, and Laura Florence. And thank you, Steve, for letting us talk, have a good time, and learn.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Yeah, thank you all so much for a great discussion. Before we go, the winner of the Amazon gift card is Janam Shah, who correctly identified Mike Post with the theme from the Rockford Files, which must be playing somewhere on Fast right now. And please join us right back here at 2:30 Eastern Time, 11:30 Pacific Time for our second great debate of the week. And I believe Laura Florence will be back for that. Will programmatic advertising overtake brand advertising in 2025? Don't miss it.